Welcome, everyone, to the Temporal 3 podcast. Happy to be here today, and today we're going to talk all about fire alarm. I am joined by Charles Olner. Charles, good morning.
Good day.
And our special guest, Mr. Scott Robertson, with Safe Fire Detection. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning. How are you all?
Oh, we're good. So, Scott, since you're our guest today, tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you do at Safe Fire Detection.
For sure. Well, again, thanks for having me today. My name's Scott Robertson. I'm Vice President of Engineering at Safe Fire Detection. I'm nice at level 4 in fire alarm.
Awesome.
Pretty much I handle everything from product development to code compliance, design evaluation, that sort of thing. And we do specialty initiating devices, various forms of detection and that sort of thing.
Awesome. So it sounds like you do all the work that the boss doesn't want to do.
Exactly.
I can relate to that. Charles is my boss, and I get to do all the work that he doesn't want to do.
Get to work.
Get to work. Well, Scott, one of the things we like to talk about in this podcast is the significance and importance of training. How important is training from your perspective as a manufacturer?
Oh, it's probably number one on our list. It's to the point that we offer all of our training for free to our customer base because we never want a dollar amount to be a hurdle in that training. We want people to know what they're doing with the equipment in the application and just in general to make sure that these systems go in correctly, get designed correctly, and are maintained correctly.
Absolutely. And you guys have some pretty sophisticated stuff. So I imagine that that's definitely a learning curve and something that's very training intensive for sure.
Definitely. And it's relatively straightforward once you take a peek behind the curtain, I like to say. But it's definitely not something that people see day to day. So a lot of people aren't familiar with it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk more about your product later in the program, a couple of things specifically that meet a specific application. So how long have you been NICET certified? Level 4, we don't meet a lot of level 4s. There's not a lot of you guys out there.
Yeah, so I went and actually kind of brute forced my NICET a couple years ago, I think 4 or so now. So I've been doing this for 16 years officially. And actually, your guys' Red Book helped me significantly going through all that.
Oh, that's awesome. Glad to hear that. Well, Charles is also a level 4. He has screw turning experience like you do as well. I'm a level 3 myself because my entire career, I've been in this for 45 years, but most of my career prior to NTC was distribution. So I never went out and turned screws, which is probably a good thing if you've ever seen my
Well, one
work.
interesting thing, Scott, what drove you to go for level 4? That's not an easy undertaking.
Yes. So Safe is a family-owned company, and I'm actually second generation of
Wow.
ownership. It's, we have a very mature industry, and someone my age coming in, adding a couple extra letters definitely helps people trust that I know what I'm saying.
I always like to tell our students the more acronyms after your name, the better off you are, the more marketable you are.
Exactly.
Well, and one thing with NICET certification that we found is it actually holds some meaning in our industry. When people see that, it's not just fluff. They realize that you went through a lot over an extended period to get that NICET level 4. It's not something for the faint of heart, so to speak.
Definitely. It's a lot of commitment, not just in terms of the work experience requirements, but the studying and the various aspects of it all, because it gets into a lot of as you guys know, the nitty-gritty of a handful of codes that a lot of people might not use in their day-to-day work.
You bring up
NICET likes to say, well, since you are experienced in the industry, the exam should require no study.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, we found that not to be the case ourselves.
I like to say to our students about the NICET exam, you're going to be in parts of the code that you didn't even know existed. That you're going to see questions about stuff that you hadn't even considered, because we think about fire alarm and we think about 72, and most technicians are very narrowly focused on certain parts of it that they work in every day. And there's a whole universe of stuff in 72 that we don't even think about because we don't deal with it. And the NICET exam was a great way to learn the entirety of the code rather than the parts you just know.
And
Definitely.
Brian, I have a question for Scott. For training, how do you conduct your training? Do you have in-person training? Do you do it online?
So most of our training we do online, and break it up depending on the audience. So, training is always, there's two main hurdles when it normally comes to it. It's price, and if someone's getting trained, they're not doing something that's generating money for the company they're working for. So all of our training is really focused on the specific audience. We've got training modules for technicians. Then we do design training on teams kind of like this with the engineers and designers. And then we have actually like specific sales training via teams as well. And we do also do it in person, but nowadays most of the stuff is handled via teams or, electronic training modules and that sort of thing.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, training does take technicians out of the field. It's tough. Brian has a saying about that and how important training is. Brian, why don't you hit us with that?
Refresh my memory. What is it? Oh, yes. What's worse than training your people and have them leave? Not training them and have them stay.
Yes,
that's actually
so true.
Zig Ziglar.
So
I stole that one from Zig Ziglar, but that's very, very true. And you're right that it really is important. They can do their job a lot better if they understand what they're doing. And yes, it is a sacrifice. Yes, your technicians are the heartbeat of your organization. They're what bring in the revenue. But if they are more effective at doing their job, they're going to bring in more revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and from my personal experience, I worked for a gentleman who had no loyalty to product whatsoever. His loyalty was sale of the week. So we ended up installing all sorts of different stuff, different installation requirements. We had to learn a new system every time we put something in. And I mean, that takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
So having that brand loyalty and sticking with one product, I think makes a big difference in terms of efficiency of your technician.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, the next topic I'd like to talk about, and this is a topic that causes a lot of consternation with our customers and our students and in general in the industry, is a favorite topic of fire alarm technicians: elevator recall and elevator shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, from your experience, do your customers have a lot of issues with that particular requirement?
There's definitely some confusion as to why it's kind of being pushed and enforced, and especially the newest versions of code that change how a couple things work. Once they kind of start understanding it, and I actually had the pleasure of meeting some of the engineers that were on the subcommittee for this section. And once they kind of actually start understanding why certain decisions were made, they kind of start getting behind it and realizing, okay, yeah, it at least makes sense as to why it's set up the way it is.
Yeah, and that is an application where we're working with one of the other trades, one of the other building trades, and that's always presents a challenge. I mean, we're used to working with the sprinkler people. We work quite frequently with them. ANSI A17.1 governs elevator recall and shutdown requirements, so the requirements in 72 are actually based on that. And I always like to say to the fire alarm people, our responsibility ends at the relay. We don't control where the elevator goes. The elevator people control that. All we can do is provide the output. But an important part for us, and a part that we have the expertise in, that the elevator people typically do not, is the detectors. And that's where it really becomes interesting. So there are two parts to this. There is the recall section in 21.3, where that requires smoke detection, does permit other options for smoke detection, because we know that elevator hoistways in particular are not ideal environments for spot type smoke detectors. But they do require smoke detection in the elevator lobby of each floor, machine room, and hoistway where the hoistway is sprinklered. And further states that the hoistway smoke shall be listed for the environmental conditions. So now if you have a smoke in the hoistway, find a spot type smoke, which is what we commonly use for fire detection, that's listed for a hoistway. I've not been able to find one, a spot type anyway. I know there are other products that we're going to discuss in a few minutes here, but it's a challenging situation. And the whole point of recall is to return the elevator to a safe floor, open the doors, let the occupants get out, take the elevator out of service, and make it available for the fire department. I mean, it really is a life safety function. Charles, what's your take on this, on recall?
Yeah. The complexity comes in with alternate floor and that sort of thing as well. And like you said, Brian, we go to the relay and then it's the elevators people to set all that up. But as fire alarm professionals, we have to have an understanding of how all that works and the importance of those lobby smoke detectors in terms of recall. So making sure that's coordinated properly and functions the right way is part of the final inspection that most AHJs look for.
Absolutely. Scott, anything to add to that based on your discussions?
Yeah, I think the other thing that I personally have been learning more about as we've gotten more and more involved with this kind of application is the increased use of elevators for the actual emergency response. Elevators that are specifically designed for fitting gurneys and that sort of thing to get people out, whether it might not be fire related, just emergency response in general. Or how we're seeing elevators now that are actually designed to be fire rated and operated during a fire event.
Wow.
So it's well, you'll start to come across plaques where it says this elevator is designed to be operated during a fire event, and you can actually start using it to evacuate the building.
Wow.
It's definitely not as common as the traditional elevator still, but we are starting to see some applications for it.
Right, right. Wow, interesting. The other part of elevator recall and shutdown is the shutdown part, and that is typically accomplished with a heat detector. And we want to shut down the elevator prior to operation of the sprinkler. And it's funny, I used to joke about this because I used to say, well, we don't want water raining down in an elevator car because we're going to electrocute people. And that was actually an incorrect statement. Charles, can you believe I made an incorrect statement?
No, but I was under that same perception myself until you specifically discovered the real purpose.
Yes. So I investigated a little bit further, read a little bit further about the ANSI requirements and the intent of the ANSI requirements. And actually, ANSI wants that engagement of shutting down the elevator so the brakes can engage before water rains down, because wet brakes in an elevator car make unstable elevators. So it's kind of like the brakes in your vehicle. When they get wet, they don't work as well. Same thing with this. So it kind of was something that was a common misconception for me. And yes, the electrical safety is part of it, but the bigger concern is we want the brakes engaged before water comes raining down. So we put that elevator heat detector within 2 feet of the sprinkler head in the hoistway and at a lower temperature. And typically we're activating a shunt breaker. So again, we're dealing with another trade. We're dealing with the electricians and bringing the relay or the connection to their shunt breaker. And this really leads into what I'd like you to discuss next, Scott, is hoistway detection shall be accessible from outside the hoistway. This is in 2137. I believe it was added in 2019.
Yeah, that
72
sounds about
2019.
right.
Yep. And why is that a concern? Why was the code changed for that? Well, if anybody's ever worked with an elevator, not the trash elevator people, but do you want to put, as a fire alarm technician, your life in the hands of somebody you just met who hopefully they know how to do their job, and you're going to get in a hoistway and install a detector and hope that they know what they're doing and not kill you while you're putting that equipment in?
I don't want to put my life in the hands of another fire alarm technician, let alone an elevator guy.
Very true, very true. Yeah, and like you mentioned, that is kind of the main goal behind why they added that verbiage. I was, as I mentioned, I was able to meet with a couple of people that were on that part of the subcommittee, and they had found that the time frame that they had evaluated, it was several decades worth of data. They had found that there were orders of magnitude more technician deaths in elevator shafts from the actual PM work than there ever was related to an actual fire event. So the maintenance of these systems were actually hurting people more than they were helping people.
No kidding.
And
Wow.
their concern was people would use this data to say, hey, we need change, so let's not put anything in the elevator shafts. But that's not a great design principle either. So they needed to try to address this problem. And the best way to do it is to make it so that the fire alarm technician doesn't have to go into that elevator shaft. So requiring the maintenance and inspection, that testing being able to be done outside the hoistway is why that verbiage was added. So that tech, you can still interface with the elevator and electrical disciplines, but that fire alarm technician doesn't need to actually get into that hoistway anymore.
So I guess our suspicions were correct, Charles. The elevator people are out to get us.
No doubt.
So Scott, you guys, Safe Fire Detection has some interesting solutions that will allow you to comply with that requirement, keep your technicians safe. I didn't realize it was that big of an issue. I knew it was a safety issue just from talking to people that do that work. But the orders of magnitude thing is really a scary thing, and the amount of injuries, unnecessary injuries and deaths. So what solution does Safe Fire Detection offer for this?
So we've really been pushing air sampling, smoke detection, as well as linear heat detection for this application. A lot of the times when this started first getting rolled out across the country, and I would mention air sampling, people, was thinking that it's overkill. That people have this, understanding or this common misconception that air sampling detection is only for data centers or highly specific, very sensitive environments. But it looks like Charles is in that boat as well.
Absolutely.
But nowadays this equipment can be, desensitized and set to the point where it's equivalent to a traditional spot detector. And it's at a price point now where we're even seeing it just in normal applications. Once you get north of 8 spots, it's actually cheaper to install an air sampling system. So, being able to take our air sampling detector, we recommend our ProPoint, and we can do a bank of elevator shafts with one detector up to 10 stories with a single device.
Wow.
And now the detector is close to the elevator shaft. You run your pipe network into the shaft itself, come back out to a test point, program and commissioning, most of the commissioning other than the transport time test. And then all your annual PMs going forward, there's no need for that tech to get in that space.
Wow.
That's flippin' awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, I'm sure our listeners are going to be excited about that. And the price point, I didn't realize. And from my limited experience with air sampling network, I mean, I'm always impressed with how quickly it responds compared to a spot type smoke. And as I was with Charles, I always thought, okay, well, it's data centers and stuff like that. Or one application I heard was power generation facilities around the turbines. And I always thought of it as a very high end, very basically, a fast responding type of detection. But it sounds like you guys have a solution that's both very price competitive and saves lives.
Exactly. And when it comes to install as well, for the lack of a better way to put it, you're installing a plastic pipe network. So you're not having to pull, bend, run conduit, then pull wire to devices and everything else. It installs significantly quicker as well. And that's part of the reason why we manufacture Red Pipe, which is the only UL approved pipe and fittings for air sampling detection in the industry. We want to make sure that we're using products that are designed and approved for the application they're being used in.
Absolutely. So we talked about smoke detection for the recall portion. What about the shutdown portion? How do you all handle that?
Yeah, so the linear heat detection has really been our go-to for that. The big requirement, like you said, in that shutdown is it has to be within 2 feet of the sprinkler. So you have to be able to have a device that gets close to that sprinkler head, wherever it's going to end up being inside the elevator shaft. Linear heat detection, compared to air sampling, more people I find are familiar with it. But, for those that aren't, it's effectively, looks like a 2 by 19 gauge wire that's designed to short once it gets to a specific temperature. So you, again, start outside your elevator shaft, go penetrate into the elevator shaft. Effectively, you're running a wire within 2 feet of all the sprinkler heads inside the elevator shaft. Then you come back out to a test switch. So all of you're doing every year is you come to the test switch, you flip the switch, test the system electronically, double check the resistance, flip it off, and you're good to go.
And again, save lives. And I think you all would agree there's nothing better that fire alarm people do than running wire. That's what we do.
Exactly.
So to that point, can I attach that linear heat detector to the sprinkler pipe to get to that sprinkler head?
So that, in this application, normally not, but there are some applications you can. So normally it says, you can't attach anything that isn't a part of the sprinkler system to the sprinkler system. In pre-action systems, you can, because the linear heat detection is a component of the sprinkler system. So in this application, most of the time you can't, because it's not considered a part of the pre-action system or a part of the sprinkler system.
Brian, I hadn't considered that. Have you thought of that aspect before yourself?
No, I hadn't actually. I always told people, no, you can't attach to it. And it makes sense in a pre-action or a deluge system because they're detection controlled, and possibly even a special hazard system. I don't know, if the special 12 or 2001 say specifically anything about it, but yeah, generally we tell people follow NEC attached to the permanent building structure, and that's not the sprinkler pipe. And we know that the sprinkler people like to cut wires if they're attached to their pipes, so that always happens.
Yeah, and it's really been, that's our recommended way for running pre-action systems, since 13 says you got to be within 5 feet of the sprinkler head for those systems anyway. And since we're a component of the sprinkler system, it simplifies the install.
So how about spacing of linear heat detection? Obviously, in a hoist way, you're not talking about a huge area unless it's a really, really large elevator. But what about spacing guidelines for linear heat detection in general?
So the big spacing guideline, well, for the elevator shaft at least, is that 2 feet within the sprinkler head.
Right.
So pretty much making sure that you check that box, it's going to be wherever it's going to need to be.
Right.
In terms of general layouts, there are some considerations depending on the type of linear heat detection for derating based off ceiling height and other typical design considerations for beams and slope ceilings and that sort of thing, which really you don't really run into for the elevator shaft.
Right. Awesome. Well, Scott, I want to thank you again for joining us today. Very interesting and informative. Very excited about being able to talk to our customers, our students, about these offerings. What's your website? What is the best way for people to reach you if they have questions about your product?
Well, if you'd like, our website is safefiredetection.com. Or, you can email me personally at Scott with 1 T R at safefiredetection.com. We also have actually published a hardbound design handbook for air sampling and linear heat detection. It's a great desk reference on, hey, I've never designed this application. What should I be keeping in mind? So, that's something as well that can be requested off of our website. Again, education is a huge part of what we do. And we want to make sure that with the specific things that we do in industry, that people know what they're doing.
Awesome. Ryan, let's make sure we get a copy of that.
I was going to say, that's my next email.
One myself.
I'll make it happen.
Appreciate that.
And Scott, where is Safe Detection located, and where are you located?
So we're out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm out of the main office as well, but they fly me all over the place. So I go from Alaska to Argentina.
Wow.
So I find that difficult to believe because I lived in Charlotte for 10 years, so did Brian, and people in Charlotte, North Carolina speak very differently than you do.
So
where's your accent?
My family's from the south side of Chicago, but I've been living in North Carolina for 30 years now. So it's
okay.
Just have enough influence from outside the state to avoid a lot of the accent, but it still comes out occasionally.
I miss Sonny's Real Pit Barbecue down there.
It's getting harder and harder to find. I think there might be one in Charlotte now. Everything else is closed up.
Wow.
There's plenty of hole-in-the-wall barbecues, and
Oh, yes.
those are better.
Oh, yes.
That is one great thing about North Carolina. I live in Asheville. Charles lives in South Dakota now, and yeah, it's one thing about North Carolina that I love is barbecue.
Oh, yes. Yeah. There's always a wide variety of barbecue to find. If you like Kansas City, you can find it. If you like mustard or vinegar base, there's always options.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Scott, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.